You ever be deep into a CI story like the llama is thriving, the kids are understanding, and then you look up and see an admin with a clipboard? Yeah. Today's episode is CI and admin observations. Smile, nod, and strategically insert buzzwords. Because while they're asking for rigor and engagement, you're just trying to keep the sombrero on the llama and the input comprehensible. I'm joined by Pamela Parks and Kelly Garcia, and we're talking survival strategies for admin observations that let you play the game without selling your CI soul. If you've ever nodded confidently while internally screaming, this episode is for you. So, welcome everybody to episode number 23, and we'll be back after these short messages. Ever feel like you're clinging to the edge of your teacher planner, just hoping today's lesson magically appears? Enter the CI Survival Kit, a monthly membership made for teachers who love comprehensible input, but also love not reinventing the wheel every Sunday night. Each month, you get fresh, ready to use lessons, time saving tools, and just enough structure to keep your teaching life together. No stress, no guilt, just monthly help from someone who gets it. Sign up at imm.us/survival and let the survival kit do the heavy lifting for once.
Welcome to Comprehend This, real talk for real language teachers. No drills, no dry theory, just honest stories, practical ideas, and a reminder you're not alone in the CI trenches. Let's dive in.
And welcome everybody. Welcome Pamela and Kelly. How is everybody doing this morning?
Great.
I'm warm today.
Oh,
After
awesome.
2 days of power outage.
I can't imagine. I grew up in Michigan and I don't remember having power outages in the wintertime very often, but I could not manage. I do not do well in the cold at all. So I could not imagine 2 days without power. Ugh. Hope you had some warm blankets.
Yep, and a fireplace.
Oh, that works too, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So refresh us, Kelly. Pamela, tell us a little bit about yourself again. I know you were on once before, but
My Pamela Parks. My students call me Madame Sensei. I teach Spanish, French, and Japanese. I also have an English language arts class, and over the summer I teach health. So I'm kind of jack of all trades, master of none. Been teaching at this school for about 15 years, using comprehensible input all the time. Love what I do. I love the puzzle solving. Love teaching. Used to be a professional translator before, which was also a dream job, but I love teaching maybe a little bit more.
awesome. And tell us about you, Kelly. You're our first time with us.
Yes, thanks for letting me jump in here. It's exciting. I am Kelly Garcia, and I have been at ESU Educational Service Unit 5 in Beatrice, Nebraska since 2019. And I threw out my textbooks in 2012 and never looked back. And I love my job because our administrators really get what we do and how we do it and why. So I'm just delighted to be here today. Happy Sunday.
And we're happy to have you with us. Yes, happy Sunday. And yes, that is so important to have administrative support. So I've got some stories about that, positive and negative, that we can all talk about. And most of us can relate to one or the other or somewhere in between that we can talk about and how to better the circumstances. I always say, do what you have to do to keep your job, but advocate for kids. So, do what you have to do because you don't want to lose your job, but at the same time, you want to advocate for kids and find a subtle way to educate the uneducated. And I will give some credit to administrators because I know their job is not easy. And the problem with administration, and it's not the people themselves, it's the position, is that they have to lead anywhere from 25 staff members to over 100 staff members, depending on how big of a school that you have. And each one has a different discipline that they teach, and they can't be a master of every one. They're the master of what they taught, but they can't be the master. And it's really hard to apply. Let's say if this, like, I remember when they did what was it called? I can't remember what they called it. But one person used to ask the questions, and then you're supposed to put them in groups of four, and each one had a different role in the groups of four, and it was talking about
Jigsaw.
the what was it?
Jigsaw.
Oh no, it wasn't that song I'm thinking. Something I'm thinking Socrative or something like that. I don't remember what it was called,
Oh,
but
Socrative
Socratic
seminar.
seminar or
something.
whole. But yeah, those things don't really work in a language
No,
classroom.
and I
Yeah.
and so it comes down and they have to apply it to everybody, and you're like, well, how does that work in PE or band or dance? Let's say, let's talk about your trumpet right now, and it doesn't. And in world language is more like a, I call it like more like a fine art. It is like dance or even a sport because it's a skill that you're building. It's not a knowledge base that you're creating. So I give them
Progressive
credit because
skill. Yes.
it's a
Mm-hmm.
real hard thing for them to be able to take district objectives and apply it evenly across an entire staff. So their job is not easy, and we could help them maybe by giving them a little bit of education about how we do it, why we do it, and why it's good for kids. Because most administrators are on the side of kids. And so if it's good for kids, they will more likely side with what we're doing. So that's kind of my little opener in there. Um, let's talk about first, before we go to the positive, does anybody have kind of a negative interaction about, maybe not negative, maybe that's not the right word, um, but a counter um, indicator with an administrator about CI?
Well, the things you were just saying, Scott, about you get the district directives and they are like across the board. That's something we've been dealing with for, geez, ever since I started, I think. Um, I mean, the idea that math class has to teach their class exactly like history class, exactly like PE, exactly like music, exactly like art. It's those are not the same skills. Why would we use the same techniques in those classes? And
Absolutely.
exactly as you were saying, we are a progressive skill. Okay. So like at one point I was fighting with the principal. I've been through four or five principals now. I was fighting with the principal because he said he didn't like homework. And I was like, are you ever going to tell a piano student you have a concert in 2 weeks? I don't want you practicing at all outside of piano class. I need the students to look at the language for 5 minutes outside of class. This is Ebbinghouse's forgetting curve. It's well documented. They're going to forget everything unless they have some more contact with it for 5 minutes. So, yeah, I've had a lot of arguments with admin over the years. Um, when I first started, my very first PD day, professional development day, they were trying to convince me that, oh, well, the English department can do this, you can do this too. You need to compare 19th century foundational literature. And I was like, they can't even read right now 20th century foundational literature. How are they going to read 19th century foundational literature?
They can't
So
read
I
Dr.
finally,
Seuss.
yeah, I wound up doing a folktale thing, and I prepared. I don't normally like to do translations because there's so much culture I can embed into, like, hey, we're reading a folktale. There's culture in there, right? But I happen to have a traditional Japanese folktale and an Aesop fable translated, and I was like, okay, I'll compare those two. We'll pretend it's 19th century, but it's far earlier than that because
Yeah.
this one is 800 BC, 800 AD, and this one is when was Aesop? I don't even remember, So, but yeah, my my biggest knockdown drag out fight was probably a couple of years ago. I had a principal who kept telling me I needed to show her the standards. Okay, in Washington State, I'm on the committee to create the standards, but we don't have standards yet. And I kept saying, there is no standard in the world that says first year students need to know how to say the pencil is yellow. That is not what we do. We have descriptors, and descriptors are a totally different thing than standards. I'm like, this is what the skills I'm teaching my students to use. This is how they're going to use it. She's like, no, I need your standards. After 6 months of fighting with her, I looked at her and I said, oh, wait a minute. Are you talking about scope and sequence? And sure enough, she wanted a scope and sequence, not standards. So she didn't know the buzzwords either. So that was like, just keep pushing back, and use the terms you know how to use. Don't say, oh, well, they're saying that word, I should use it too. Like descriptors, that's the hill I'm going to die on. Formative assessment, I'm going to keep pushing back. No, this is a formative assessment. We world language teachers are constantly formatively assessing. Don't force me to do a summative assessment right here just because you think everyone should be giving the exact same formative assessment on the exact same time, on the exact same day. It's no longer a formative assessment if you do that. So, I don't know. There's a lot.
It sounds
Sorry,
like.
get off my soapbox.
Yeah.
Wow.
Great. Let me just say, I love my current principal. I love her so much. But it's been like, I've been through so many principals of like, there was one where even the teacher who had the random acts of kindness club, she would come to me and say, that guy scares me. So I've been through a lot of principals. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like.
How about Kelly? Do you have a negative or counter experience?
Yeah, actually, in one of my old schools, way, way long ago, we would have these PLCs, of course, and then our administration would create teams within our school to visit. Like, for example, for the Spanish class, maybe we would have a 10 to 15-minute lesson, and we would have a fourth grade teacher, science teacher, and a music teacher, and an administrator there watching that lesson all at the same time, trying to give us constructive feedback when they knew nothing about what was going on. Right. So they would suggest a polisher. Oh, to make your lesson better, you should have the student speaking. Spanish 1, they're not able. They are, I mean, they can do memorize words, and phrases, but I was in the middle of a story talking to them. They were engaged, they were watching. And then as my polisher, they wanted some kind of spoken something from the student. And that just, it's like, tell me you don't understand how to teach foreign language without saying you don't know how to teach foreign language.
Yeah. And I have had a complete mixture of combinations. So many people on the podcast have heard my story before, but I started in 2001, right after 9/11. They hired me, in October, because they had an overflow of kids and not enough teachers. So it was a part-time position. I had never taught before. They hired me on an emergency permit. They only hired me because they were desperate, because I had no teaching experience whatsoever. And I sucked that first semester. I sucked. I knew it. It was horrible. It was painful. I was bored. And if I was bored, they were bored. I didn't know what I was doing, and I was terrified. It was Spanish too. I only had to teach fifth and sixth period. It was horrible. But I knew it was horrible, and I'm like, there's no way that I can do this for 30 some years. There's no way. So I've got to either fix it or I've got to quit. So I tried the fixing. And so in December of that year, during winter break, I searched desperately for something, and I found Blaine Ray and TPRS, and that was, we didn't call it Comprehensible Input back then. It was only TPRS. It was the only alternative to the textbook. So that's what I did, and I went whole hog starting second semester, and it was amazing. In fact, my principal told me that after first semester, I was on the no rehire list. But when he saw me in the second semester, it was amazing the transformation I did. And it really wasn't me, it was the method, I guess. And I was doing it badly. I was horrible at it because I had no training in it yet, because I couldn't get my first training until the summertime. So
there was no training, right?
Well, there was some training. Yes. Blaine Ray did trainings, but that was it. So he said that's what transformed you. And so he was, the other teachers were not into it, but he was into it, so it was worked well. When the economy went bad in California in 2005, I got laid off, and then I found a school district in Vegas, and they were a CI school. So I didn't have to worry about it then. It was The principal wanted it, the assistant principal, everybody wanted it. All the teachers were on board. So it was easy peasy. I wanted to get back to California. So in 2012, I moved back to California. I got back in because the economy was better. And I got lucky into a job where this is the best experience I've had. It was a middle school. I didn't want to teach middle school, and I already had a job. I got this job, and I only went to this interview because my friend said, I put you on this interview. That's the only reason you're here, that I went to the interview, because I already had a job committed, and I was moving from where I was in California to a different district in California, a different part of California. My house was all packed up, and school started in a week. So that's what I was doing. So I only went to this interview, and I knew I did not want middle school. I already accepted this job, so there's nothing, I'm just doing it for the formality. It was a weird interview. I should have known this about this principal to begin with. It should have set off bells. He was weird. He called me in for an interview at 7 o'clock at night. He was the only one in there, and he's in t-shirt, shorts, and flip-flops. And I am like, this is the strangest interview I've been on. So I'm going and doing it, and he's telling me all about the school and all this stuff. And I'm like, I go, forgive me, but this is a really strange interview. He's like, this isn't the effing, except he said it. He cussed through the whole thing. He goes, this isn't the effing interview. I'm preparing you for the interview. The interview's tomorrow. I'm like, okay, well, I did tell you I already have a job, right? I'm just here for formalities. He goes, yeah, you told me, but I'll see you tomorrow. So I come in for the interview for tomorrow, and he says, we'll let you know in a couple days whether you get the position or not. And that I'm like, I'm telling you right now, I'm not accepting the position. I already have a job. I'm only doing this to honor my friend who scheduled me for this. I go, I need to fill out your paperwork, because at the time, this school district did not do online applications. You had to do everything by hand. And I'm like, in California, we do EdJoin, and it's all digital. So I'm like, I am not filling out all this stuff by hand. There's just no way. I'm not even doing that part. He's like, yeah. We'll call you in a couple days. He calls me that afternoon, says, can you come back to the school? And I'm like, yeah, I can come back. What do you need? He goes, just come on. Comes in, and he goes, I want to just show you around the school. This is your room. This is we just got the PE floor done. See, our new mascot is put on the floor. It was done. This is a beautiful school. Da, da, da. I'm like, did I tell you I already have a job? He goes, yeah, you told me. Just quit that job and come here. You're here. He goes, here's your keys. We start tomorrow. I'll see you then. So this is the kind of principal he is, and he was an amazing principal. So I had to give you all that preamble to get to the point of what we're doing. So they were just starting world language. They were becoming an IB school that year. So they were starting the world language program, and they wanted to do CI. So it was a CI, and he didn't really know much about it. He was a math teacher. And then he paid for all of us to go to NTPRS. I had been going for many years, but he paid for our whole team to go, which at the time was only 3 teachers, because we were just starting and we're all teaching level 1. And he showed up too. He came with us. And he took the level 1 with Katya, the Russian. And I don't know if it was he was interested in Russian, or he was more interested in Katya because she's a beautiful woman. Because he always said, he goes, if I leave my wife, that's the one I want, Katya. So it was so funny. But he picked up some Russian, and he was really amazed. He goes, this is amazing. This is what our kids need. And for him, language was not a afterthought, an elective. It was a must-have, because he goes, the future is language. You need, the world's getting smaller, and it's not an elective. It's really important that our kids have a second language. And this is amazing, because my because I took Spanish. He goes, I can't speak a word of it. I took it for 4 years, and I can speak some Russian after a few hours. And he said, this was just really amazing. So I don't know, again, I don't know if it was the method or Katya, but either way, he was on board. And so he was very advocated for us a lot. And so made sure we got what we wanted, what we needed. He came 2 more years to that conference, going through and doing it and learning more about it. And I was in there one time, and I go, we were in presentation, and she was talking about deskless classrooms, and I'm like, that's what I want. And he goes, well, why don't you have it? I go, because I asked our assistant principal who's in charge of facilities, I asked, he said, no, you can't do that. You got to have desks in your classroom. And he goes, hold on a minute. And he starts texting, and he goes, your desk will be gone within 15 minutes because it was summer break. And he got rid of the desk. And then he goes, but you kids need something to write on, so let me get you some clipboards. And so he ordered some clipboards for us, and they were waiting when I got back to school, at the end of the summer. And so he was he was an advocate for it, even though he was a math teacher. And then I have another principal, and this is going to go to the negative, who has no clue. Was a special needs teacher, which was awesome, but doesn't really have a clue of how language acquisition works and all of that kind of stuff. And so he's telling me, like you said, the multiple assessments. How do you know that your kids learned what you were supposed to teach them that day? Well, I go, well, it's progressive. It's not a I taught and they learned kind of a thing. I said, I'm asking questions. He goes, well, Coral, you can't ask Coral questions because Coral questions don't tell you about individual students. I go, but they do, because I can see which kids are answering and which with confidence and who are whispering or who are looking around at people. I'm watching the kids, and I do individual questions. You just haven't seen them yet because my lesson is not a 1 hour lesson. My lesson's a whole week-long lesson, and we haven't got it. I just introduced on Monday and Tuesday what we're working on for the week, and you're only seeing the beginning stages. And didn't like even though I gave him research about the no desk thing, said I had to put desks back in my classroom because kids have to have their own space. I'm like, my kids do have their own space. But he's like, well, they don't have a place to put their backpacks. Nobody puts their backpacks on a desk. They put them on the floor, which is the same place they put them without a desk. So we just got butting heads all year long. Has no real understanding because he's seeing a textbook version and sees that every day they're doing a physical assignment that they're turning in. And so I ended up having to make everything that I do an assignment and have to turn in. We do calendar talk. I have to ask you 3 questions to write down on a piece of paper and turn it in about calendar talk. I'm like, really? Calendar talk's only supposed to be a 5-minute activity. It's not supposed to be a 20. I don't want to spend 20 minutes on this because that's just kind of keeping the dates fresh in their mind. It's not really the content I'm trying to teach. So I've had that big struggle. And I had one administrator come in Vegas, and they said, why are your kids level 1, week 4? Where are those DOK 3 questions? I'm like, DOK 3 questions? My kids barely can communicate in English, let alone in Spanish, and you're asking to do do you do DOK 3 questions in kindergarten? It's really not, they just don't have a clue of what they're doing because they only know the experience of teaching about language like the textbook does and not the actual language itself. Because, you don't ask your infant when you're teaching them their native language, can you give me a DOK 3 question? Give me some thought-provoking questions about that. No, there's a disconnect. And again, it goes back. Again, no fault to many administrators. Administrators who don't want to learn or be educated is a different issue. But for the majority of educators, there's too much to learn for them to be able to understand every discipline. So I'm not faulting them for that. But when us teachers provide you with information to help you do your job a little bit better, to make your job easier, please trust us that we know what we're doing.
Yes.
Scott, I
Kelly,
want to go
your
back
turn.
to how you started your story, because I think this is really crucial. Our students come in the room and they know nothing, they know zero, and so we have to teach them, right? Why is it that educators don't get the same grace that we give our students? Okay, you said for the first 6 months you were a crappy teacher. For the first maybe 7 months I was a crappy teacher. We all were awful when we started. It's called the learning curve.
Yeah.
And I mentor a lot of teachers, and I keep saying, hey, cut them some slack. They're just learning. And it's the same as if, we were teaching students. When we teach other teachers, It takes a while. It takes some repetition. It takes practice. It takes failure before you get good at something. And
Absolutely.
Yes.
so, why don't we offer that same amount of grace to educators? Like, we're
And
supposed to like roll out of bed in the morning and be like absolute. Well, I mean, this is how I'm teaching English this year. Is my previous principal said, well, gee, you can teach Spanish, French, Japanese. You can teach English too, but teaching English as a second language, which I've done, is totally
totally
different
different.
than now let's open our copy of Great Gatsby. And so I
Yes.
have to learn all sorts of different skills now to teach English. My bag of
Mhm.
tricks that I use in my language classes does not work on my junior English 11 students,
Yeah. And
So it just like, let's cut educators some slack. It is a learning
Mhm.
curve. And I hope that's why people are tuning into the podcast right now, is because they want to learn. And even veteran teachers such as ourselves, I'm still learning.
oh
There
yeah,
is
Yes.
so much
absolutely.
to learn. I will never be a master at what I do, but I sure as heck do try. And I think
And yeah, I've
that's
never been
the
able to
key
reuse a
with it.
lesson plan that I've done in previous years for 25 years, and all the lesson
Oh,
plans, I have to adjust them every single
Yes.
time.
thank you so much for saying that, because right now the district is making us write our lesson plans and etch them in stone. And I'm
Oh,
like, I change it every year. I am not going to do the same thing every year. I got 2 Spanish 1 classes. I don't do the same thing with my 2 Spanish 1 classes. My colleagues in the district, because I'm one of 4 Spanish teachers, they don't do the same thing. Like, class dynamics
yeah.
makes a
Yes.
difference.
Teach the kids. And I'll just
Yeah.
interrupt real quick about what you said, because I don't know if this came from Blaine itself. That's how I heard it. So I'm going to credit to Blaine, but I don't know if he got it from somebody else. But he always says, and I love this little phrase, he goes, anything worth doing is worth doing poorly at first. So it's
I
so
love it.
true, because whatever we do, and it has nothing to do with education, anything you do, if you learn to skateboard, you learn to swim, you learn to play football, whatever it is, you suck when you start.
Yes.
Nobody starts at perfection. And so you have to
Mm-mm.
build that skill. And so if it's something worthwhile to you, then it's worthwhile that you're going to suck for a while. It's going to be painful. You're going to be putting lots of effort in, but the reward will come if you keep at it. And this was something that really um, hit home with me, because, and this is, I don't mean this to be offensive, so please do not take it. It's my words never come out the way I want them to, but I am the most autistic, non-autistic person. I have these quirks that go with things that make I swear I'm autistic in many cases. But one of the ways I was when I was a kid, if I wasn't good at something right away, I quit it right away.
Well,
And so
that's
that
the
was a
effective filter,
yeah,
right?
so
And
I
but everybody's got it for everything, and we need, if buzzword time, growth mindset,
yep,
right?
Yes.
absolutely. So Kelly, tell us about you. What's your experience here?
Well, I just think like Pamela said, give yourself grace because we don't know what we don't know in the beginning, and when we know better, we're going to do better. And I guess that's just the thing. And if
That's another
my
quote thing.
opinion, if we want to educate the administrators on what we do and how we do and why we do it and what to look for, Bryce Hadstrom has a superb checklist for observation in the world language classroom. So it helps the administrators unpack what they're seeing. And I think it's really important that there's a little quote here. And if you don't mind, I'll share it with you.
Go right ahead.
Not using the target language in a language class is like a band teacher letting students play ping pong every day and never playing music. It's messy, and there's a lot of mental gymnastics when we are trying to teach students. We're doing our CI lesson, we're telling that story about the llama with the sombrero, and then there's a lot of mental gymnastics that people can't see going on inside the student's head because we're teaching for the long haul. We're building background knowledge, we're teaching for proficiency, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. We have to make them
Absolutely.
understand that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love that you quoted, because I don't know if you knew that you quoted Maya Angelou, but she says, I'm going to mess up the quote exactly, but Do the best that you can, but when you know better, do better. And so that's what I always
Yeah.
use for when I try to train people to do CI, because then they go, well, I've been doing this for 15 years. And so was I a horrible teacher for the past 15 years? No, you did the best you could with what you knew, but now you know
Exactly.
better. So now you can do better. And I think that's a really another good quote that really works really well. And I'm going to put it up on our screen here. Give me 1 second. And I've got that checklist that you talked about from Bryce. Uh,
Yes.
Love Bryce Hedrum so
oh yes,
much.
awesome, awesome, awesome. And it's funny when when I was looking for a job, I had an opportunity to work with him or with Carmen Andrews in Vegas,
Oh,
and
wow.
Wow.
I was interviewing, getting ready to do the interview for him in Colorado. And I was talking with the assistant principal was on board bringing me on, and then the principal had another idea. So I didn't even get the interview because the principal override the assistant principal, but I had almost got a chance to work with him. Um, it would have been amazing, but I did work with the
Right.
amazing Carmen Andrews from Vegas. And where
Wow.
did download go? So I did get a good
While you're
experience.
typing, getting that up, and we're just name dropping, we talk about Blaine Ray a lot, but
Yeah.
my introduction to comprehensible input was through Ben Slavic, and
Oh yes,
Hmm.
yes,
I
yes.
really like, yeah. So I'll just name drop that.
Yeah, I've learned a lot from him too. A couple of his books I used. So here
Yeah.
is, let's see if I can scroll through. Let's make it smaller. So you're not going to be able to really see this. I'm going to put the link though in the, let me go ahead and put this link in
Definitely.
the
Yeah.
chat so you can download it for yourself. There is the link. Sorry it's so long, but that's the actual link. So you've got the things in here. The checklist for observing a world language classroom. So, target language use. The teacher speaks in the target language. Less than 50% of the time, 75-95% of the time, 50 to 75% of the time, or 90% or more. We also, in that school where I had that amazing principal, we decided as a team to observe each other on
Hmm.
our own, and it was just a private between us. It was not going to admit in any way. And one of the questions we only asked 3 questions on the little form, the observation form. How much target language was being used? What did they do to make the language understandable? And then what did they do to make the kids comfortable in class? Those are the only 3 questions we asked. Then you had a free form, and we can only talk about positive. But it is so important. How are they going to learn language if they don't hear language?
Yep.
Um, Teacher uses a variety of comprehension checks. Teacher offers opportunities for sophisticated language use. You don't see a lot of that in level 1, but you still can. You can still ask those. I call those the how and why questions, because the how and why questions require a little bit more language, and I know which kids to target. See, my administrator thinks I don't know what my kids can do. I do know, because I know who to ask the right questions. I know to ask little Joey over here a simple yes or no question where I am pointing at the word yes so he can get it and feel successful. And then I know little Sarah over here, she's just the average kid, just a really everyday kid, good kid. And I need to know, I got to stick to a who, what, where, a concrete question. And I still may have to point to the answer. And then I've got superstar Stephanie, let's call her, superstar, who wants to prove and show off that she can do all this language. So I'm going to ask her a how or why question because I know she can do it. And that gives her a way to show herself off. So there are ways to do this, and we use a lot of these comprehension checks to be able to do it, and a lot of ways to give them, even at their level, ways to use sophisticated language. And then he's got the best practices. Teacher raises the level of student attention by all the different things that we do. Students are actively engaged in lesson by. And notice it doesn't necessarily say that they're out there speaking. They don't, especially in level 1, they're not doing a lot of speaking. I was asked in an interview question, what do you think about the target language use in the classroom? Both from the teacher standpoint and the kid standpoint. And my thing was, well, let me be honest. My expectation is that everybody try to use the language as much as possible. But the reality is the only language I can control is my own. So I control my language and I strive for my 90 to 95%. But I use the lack of language as a formative assessment that
Right.
either one of three things are happening. They're still in the silent period because we don't expect infants to be able to talk instantly out of the womb. They don't have the vocabulary for what they want to say. And 9 times out of 10, they do, but they're thinking at their grade level vocabulary, not at kindergarten vocabulary. They want to say a much more sophisticated sentence and they need to go
Yes.
simple. And then the
They do.
third thing is they don't have the confidence. They're not in the silent period. They do have the vocabulary, but they lack confidence. So they're not using the language is a formative assessment for me. And then I need to ask further questions to find out which of those three stages are they in. So then I know how to combat that. So, but notice it doesn't say there in his, students are active and engaged by speaking the target language. They
Mhm.
show us in so many other different ways. And then students are held accountable by the lesson by here's where you're showing the evidence. The speaking is in there, retelling materials in their own words, formative assessments, helping each other, translation when asked, writing in the target language, or in L1 to show that they understood. So
Yes.
there's lots of different things. This is an incredibly useful document. Um, and I provided this with my administrator and said he had his own checklist. So, and in fact, this administrator also, and the kids noticed as well, fell asleep during an observation and was also
Yeah.
showing boredom because he couldn't understand the language. So he couldn't really verify the stuff that was going on. So thank you, Kelly,
Right.
for bringing this up. This is an excellent resource. And Bryce has tons of stuff on his website on brycehedstrom.com, free and paid, that I highly encourage people to take a look when they get a
Mhm.
chance and look at that. So for those who are listening on the podcast, I'll put the link as well in the show notes. So if you're only listening and not viewing, you can look at it yourself and download it for yourself as well. I'll put those in the show notes when I put them up there for you guys.
At least it could start a conversation between you and your administrators,
And that's what we're
if
talking
nothing
about.
else.
I think
Yeah.
that's what we need to have. I remember I told you at the beginning that my firm belief was to do what you need to do to keep your job, but advocate for the kids and do some education if need be. And so having a candid conversation where we're not accusing anybody of anything and we're being empathetic to both sides. They are being empathetic to our position and we are being empathetic to their position. We can have these candid conversations about what's going on and why we do what we do and give them some assistance to help them. And any educator, not just administrator, any educator worth their salt is always willing to learn. we
Yes.
we I have not met a school district that does not encourage lifelong learners. And if we cannot model that ourselves, and if our administrators cannot model that themselves, then we're in the wrong business.
Yep.
And
I totally agree.
and I'm going to try to look it up here. I'm probably not going to find it before. I have a book and it might be out of print. Elephants teaching book. I have to look for this book. We'll keep talking and I'll look for this book because what I love about this book, it has nothing to do with education. We're not education, nothing to do with teaching languages. But I'll find it's a short novel. They asked us to read it in college during my education thing. And I love the book. I have it. But what I love about this book, and we kind of talked about this earlier with Pamela, it's about an English teacher who literally had his lesson plans laminated. And they didn't have a date on them. They had the 5th day of school, the 6th day of school, the 10th day of school, all of that. And he used this grammar textbook. But his clientele had changed. He's now an inner city English teacher with inner city kids of color. And he couldn't relate to these kids at all. Could not relate to these kids at all. And he just kept teaching the same way he did when his school was mostly a white population. He taught the same way to the kids, and it wasn't reaching them. And he's asking them to do these different types of essays, and the kids are like, "Guy, we don't know where our next meal is coming from. We are not thinking about when we go home to write a 500-word essay," going back and forth. Then there's this custodian who's an immigrant custodian, and I can't remember. He leaves in the middle of the book, and I don't know if he had to leave because of immigration status. I don't remember. But he had to leave. But he left these quotes on the board every day after he cleaned the room. He left, and the kids thought these were warm-ups. So they were starting to respond to these quotes. And throughout the novel, and it's short, it maybe just, I don't even think it was 200 pages. The teacher starts to learn to throw out the textbook and to actually teach the kids in front of us. And this was before I even knew what TPRS was or CI was. And this is exactly what the whole movement for CI is to teach the kids in front of us and not from a concrete textbook, which is out of date the date it was published, because it's a piece of paper and it doesn't change. The culture points they put in there are the things that at the time the book was created were interesting to kids is no longer interesting to kids by the time it gets published to us and get bought by us. So, and then we keep the books for 14 years on average for language teachers. So by the time it's done, like I remember one was talking about Michael Jackson. I'm like, Michael Jackson is a pariah now. Nobody talks about Michael Jackson anymore. And the whole book is trying to relate to Michael Jackson. I'm like, this is not good. This is not good. So,
or my textbook that has me teach the word cybercafe.
Oh,
like why?
VHS tapes. My kids don't even know what a VHS tape is. They barely know what a DVD is.
Oh, lecture de DVD. I've got that in my French textbook. Yeah.
So it's so funny.
No,
but
you don't even have to move to the inner city. Like, in the last decade, students have changed. Their attention spans have changed. What they're willing to do has changed. There's been a societal shift. So, yeah, absolutely.
I'm trying to find this damn book because it is such a good one to recommend. I love to recommend.
All right. So while you look for the book, so you were talking about it should be student-centered, and I think every single admin will agree with that.
Yep.
So I know here in Washington State, we use the Danielson framework for all of our evaluations. Kelly, what do you do in Nebraska?
Do you do Danielson? Not that one. We use the other one that I can't remember. But it's not the Danielson.
Oh yeah, the Danielson, when it came out, it was on the CI group bashed it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And Dr. Terry Waltz got into a fight with Danielson about it, and then she got Danielson to say, well, when I was writing this, I didn't think about every discipline, and it probably does not apply to world language.
There you go.
Yeah. So because it's student-centered, I think there are a lot of tricks we can do when the admin walks in the room with that clipboard and wherever it is in your lesson that you're doing. So let me just, while you're looking for that, I'll just give some solid things for our listeners.
Go right ahead. Yes.
So I first was hired 15 years ago to teach Japanese. I taught Japanese 1 through 4. And whenever the principal walked in, there is what you do in Japan, where I went to school. Oh my gosh, the principal walks in, everybody on your feet right now, you have to greet him and bow to him. Okay? So, minasan tatte kudasai, everyone stand up. Ore, ohayou gozaimasu, whatever. And then the principal was always blown away by that. Like, oh wow, the class is eating out of her hands. But that's like typical Japanese culture, right? So when he had me start bringing on French, I was like, oh, well, I really like doing this. It's not really part of the French culture, but it is part of the French culture to be polite. So by golly, when the admin walks in, you guys, tout le monde dit bonjour. And they all turn around their seats and they say hello to the principal. And, then when I had to start taking on Spanish, it's like, yeah, the students still need to work on their greetings. why not? When an admin or when a colleague walks in, why shouldn't they greet him? Be friendly and everything. So that's the first thing I say, because they want to see the students doing something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, second, second, a very solid thing is teach your kids rejoinders so that they can shout at you during the whatever it is you're doing. Like, oh, c'est ridicule, whatever it is you want them to shout at you. Teach them those rejoinders. And then there are a couple of really good Kagan techniques because the Danielson framework, and Kelly, I don't know what you have, but it's probably kind of similar. They want to see students conversing with each other. All right. So you can have a turn and talk in the middle of your giant CI lesson. And frankly, I think because of the students' attention spans lately, I have to do this anyway, because some of them, like I have one class, 50% of them are my barometer students. Okay. Because we're always constantly formatively assessing. And I'm like, 50% of you are just parroting or you're moving your lips, and I can tell you're not really getting it. So we need to chunk and chew a lot. And there are a lot of things we can do where, hey, I need you to be a little more interactive with the material right now. So there's your simple turn and talk, and you could teach them how to do that in the target language. You can give them the turn and talk in the target language so that the students will know, and you just ask them a question and say to your partner, répondez à votre partenaire, tell your friend, whatever, où est le llama? Where's the llama? And have them do that. I always take my lessons when we got the story mostly fleshed out, when I've got about at least 30 lines of the thing, or even like 30 lines is also like the llama did not go to the discotheque. Okay, that's a line. All right. So when I have about 30 of them, I print it and I make the font like really, really big, like 42-point font. And then I run down to the copier and I print it on cardstock, and I just go slice, slice, slice. And then I've got cards to play with. Okay. So during the story, we can play quiz, quiz, trade, which is great. So I don't want the students translating usually, but if I've got questions on the cards, then the other student has to answer it. Or if they know the next line of the story, then they have to answer it. And then if I don't want to do quiz, quiz, trade, I could do fan and pick, which is another Kagan technique. And boy, my admin came in last month and watched me doing that and absolutely loved it. Because first of all, when I held up the cards for the students, I was like, de qué color son las tarjetas? What color are the cards? And the students were able to answer azul. And the admin was very impressed with that. And then the fact that the students were asking each other the questions when I passed out the cards to them. And for fan and pick, what I wound up doing was I printed 6 cards. I have table groups. So I have 39 students in one class, and usually 36 in the others. And well, that's so that I could take on that English class. So I printed up the cards with their roles on them. So I have the students shuffle the cards, and then they pick the role, and the one role says you get to read the card to the table, and then the other card says you get to answer, and then another card says you get to coach, and another card says these are your rejoinders, felicidades, buen trabajo, whatever. And so all the students had a role to do, and it was right there in front of them. And so when I gave them the cards, which were part of the story, they were able to interact with the story. So those are my solid techniques for when admin walks in and the admin wants to see the students turn and talk. That's basically what they want to see the students do, regardless what you're doing. So, sorry, that was like an information dump.
And I'll just
Did you find it, Scott? I bought you some time. Did you find it?
I did. We'll talk about that in just a second. But you brought me something else that made me think of something. The teacher-centered thing, and the student-centered and the teacher-centered. What I try to explain to my admins is that it looks from the outside what we do, even if we're not doing all the things you're talking about, it looks very teacher-centered because it looks like we're lecturing. We're sitting at the top of the classroom, and we're doing all the talking, and the kids are doing the listening. But I say it's not. It's no more teacher-centered than band, where the
Mhm.
instructor is at the front of the room pointing at all the different instruments. All the content is coming from the kids. The music is coming from the kids. Where is my story coming from? Not from me. It's coming from the kids. I'm asking leading questions. That's using the baton to point to the right kids to get the answers to the leading questions I'm asking so that we can co-create a story. And my job is only to ask the right questions and then to pick the right answer that I got from the kids. So it's teacher led, but it is student centered because they're not my stories. The stories, look at period 1 versus period 2 versus period 3 versus period 4. I'm teaching the same content, but we have all these different stories because they came from the kids themselves. When I write stories, I write stories about my kids. My test questions come about my kids. So all of those kinds of things. So it looks from the outsider, especially if you don't understand the language, that it is very teacher centered, but it's not. And using a framework like Bryce's or another framework that's similar that shows that them understanding the language, them doing gestures in response to the language, that is also student centered because they can't always turn and talk. On that first week of Spanish 1,
Right.
they can't turn
Yep.
it. It's going to be totally rote memorized. And I am firmly against rote memorized because I will tell you, I took French, German, and Spanish in school, and I had to memorize those awful dialogues, and I can't memorize word crap. And I had to memorize those dialogues, and you memorize them, and you had every class made you memorize
Yep.
these dialogues. Then I went to Germany, and I go, oh, I remember the hotel dialogue. I'll do my part. And then the other guy didn't know his lines because he didn't answer it the exact same way. And now I'm stuck because I don't know what he said because he didn't say what he was supposed to say. So I go, I know my next line, but I don't know if it follows what you just said. So the rote memorization doesn't teach kids how to interact and adapt in a real life situation. And so that's my goal. So my kids can't turn and talk. Yes, we've been practicing what's your name and how old are you, but they're not ready to produce that kind of thing yet. If I ask them the question, they can answer it, but the other kid can't ask them the question. They're just not ready for that. And
Right.
the way that I teach, I'm not teaching them rote memorization of those phrases. I'm just asking every kid those questions as I'm getting to know the kids because I talk to 1 or 2 kids a period in that first couple of weeks till I get through all of my kids, and I go through all the same questions. What's your name? How old are you? When's your birthday? Where are you from? All those same questions. And then I ask, what's your favorite activity? So I can get to know you as a personal. Then the next kid, I do the same questions. So they hear them, they know them, but they're not ready to produce them. They didn't memorize them. So the turn and talk doesn't always work for those types of things. Go ahead, Kelly.
Well,
Well,
and that's
Scott,
why I say always have your students have some crutch in their hands. The rejoinders, the if you've printed up the cards that are like the lines from your thing after you've been working on it for a while. Yeah, because they're gonna panic. They've got that affective filter that you need to lower. And they need some processing time. Absolutely. Kelly, I'm sorry. I did not mean to cut you off.
that's okay. We are all here together, and I got you. And also, in the beginning, with the 3 modes of communication, you're focused on letting students do the interpretive business. You're just trying to throw enough language at them and give them enough repetitions so that you can move on to the interpersonal and the presentational where they can do more with partners or on their own. So we're teaching for proficiency. What can they do in the language? Like you were saying, you memorized your dialogue for a hotel, but the other guy didn't know what was going on. But you're teaching for proficiency. Show me that you can get this task done later. Of course, after the interpretive and you just, go through so many cycles of that. That's all I
Absolutely.
have.
Absolutely. And I'm going to tell you now, I've got that book because I did find it. I know it always has an elephant in it, but beyond that, I never remember the title. I'm really bad about that. Here's the picture of the book, if I can put it on the screen. And I couldn't get a bigger picture, so I apologize. It's going to get blurry as I make it bigger, but it's called Entertaining an Elephant. It's available for $9.49 on paperback. I wish they'd put this in Kindle book. It's 115 pages. I told you it was short, and I put the link in the chat, and I'll also put it in the show notes for my podcast listeners in there. But it is a really, really good book. I highly recommend every teacher read it, not just world language, not just English teachers. It is a really good educational book. And it's short, 115 pages. You can whip that out in an evening. It's, not too bad. And I'm a slow reader. So it's just a really good book. I gave you the kind of premise that it was about, but just seeing the transformation of this teacher who started out with literally laminated lesson plans written by the day of the school year, and transforming completely. So it's got lots of different themes about teaching to inner city kids and adapting to them, especially if you are not from that group that you're trying to teach. It's, teaching from how to teach away from a strict textbook type curriculum to a more student-centered curriculum. Because I remember one of the things he had him do is he goes, yeah, we're worrying about, we got cockroaches and the sink's not working and the plumbing isn't. So he had them write essays or actual letters to the landlord about the problems that they had. So he took his
Relevant.
standards that he had to teach, and instead of making it a boring business letter that doesn't relate to these kids at all, they really got involved in writing these letters to their landlord about the complaints that they had about their living conditions and such. So it's just a really good all-around book, and I think it should be required reading for all teachers. I just got to remember that title a little bit more. I'm going to put that in my notes somewhere so I can find it more easily. I had to go through all my saved books in Amazon to find it. But yes, it's a really good book. I highly recommend that book in there. So we are coming to the end of our time. It went really fast today. But let's go around. Everybody give one tidbit to leave people with. Those who have supportive and those who have, I don't want to say less supportive, but who are more questioning admins along the way. What advice would you give them? So whoever would like to start.
I would just start with Bryce Hedstrom's checklist and say, hey, can I talk to you about what you might see in a world language classroom?
Absolutely.
Start there and let him know it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Absolutely. Great suggestion. What about you, Pamela?
So when I first started teaching, the union had a little like professional development for us, and it was about like how to handle a parent-teacher conference. And they had a couple of tips which I thought were really good. One was always have something in between you and the parent, some piece of paper that you can focus on. So to say, oh, this is what your student did. And that way it's not about like the parent looking at you or anything. But so I think that also works with admin. And you don't want to be adversaries. You want to be allies, right?
Absolutely.
So keep focusing on the students, okay? This is what the students know. Hey, I am an expert in what I do. You got to trust me, but this is our technique, and this is how I get the students' responses, and this is how I formatively assess my students. And yes, here are some summative assessments and everything, but this is my goal, and this is how the students are reacting to everything we're doing in class. But just keep both of your heads focused on the same thing. And I think that will, because I've certainly bumped heads with admin over the years a lot. And so I just got to keep bringing it back to this is what's best for the students, and this is why it's best for the students. Sometimes it takes a good 6 months to get the admin there, but eventually you'll be there. So that's my advice.
Absolutely. And I've just got two. One I've been reiterating since the beginning, and that is, do what you need to do to keep your job, advocate for your students, and educate where possible. That will really really help you in that endeavor. And you're right, we are working together as a team. That's what we're supposed to do along the way. And then the other point I was going to make, I completely lost. Pamela, you gave me the idea, and then now I completely it completely escaped me. Um, Let me try to think here. What was I going to say about the? Oh, that's it. Focus on results. So that's, your administration wants data. So I can say, I know my kids can write. You know how I know? And here is a piece of writing that they did. I know my kids can understand. You know how I know? Here's a piece of reading that they interpreted. You know, I know my kids are thinking about learning because that metacognition is a big piece as well. How do I know? Because I ask reflection questions every Friday, and this is what they wrote. So have that evidence as well. So when you're educating your administrator, give them the evidence, the data that they're looking for. Because, yes, in an observation, they're focusing on the process, but they're only there for one period once every couple of months, if that many, maybe twice they see you and they're supposed to make a whole academic decision based on 2 hours. Let's be realistic. They're not seeing the whole picture. So you show them that, yeah, you saw this and this is what it led to over here so that they have the data along the way. And that's also how I recommend getting your other teachers who may not be CI focused on board. Because when I was younger and I was a little more cocky, I was more of an evangelist and I would get in their face and I would, this is the best thing and what you do sucks, that kind of stuff. I didn't put it that way, but I was much more strongly pushing people towards this and being such an advocate. And I know they didn't want to hear me anymore. But what I found works so much better is in those PLCs, because back in the day we didn't have PLCs in the early 2000s, was when they go in the PLCs, they go, oh, we're focusing on writing. And I bring out my piece of writing and I don't say anything about it. And they look at it, they go, dang, this is good. How are you getting your kids to do this? Then I can tell them what I did. So then it's focused on the results where they want the same results. They don't want to know the process right away. They don't want to know the process first and then see the results. They want to see the results. And they go, oh, then they ask the question, how did you get there? And now their ears are open to listening to what you did. And so I find that is a much more effective method as well. So both in administrative ways and in getting other teachers on board with CI, because let's face it, there are awesome textbook teachers and there are awesome CI teachers. There are crappy CI teachers and there are crappy textbook teachers. The bottom line is we all have the same goal to get kids to be bilingual. That's our goal. To be honest, the data shows textbook has not been successful in that. Because in America, at least since the 80s, they've been requiring 2 years of language. And kids are just not being bilingual from that. So it hasn't worked. So we need to look at something else. So even the top textbook teachers only get about 4% of their kids, which in a classroom of 35 is one kid, to be somewhat bilingual. And CI has a much better success rate in that because CI is nothing more than teaching kids how to acquire language the same way they acquired it as a baby. And that is pretty much universally successful. There are very few failures, and usually the failure is because the kid has some kind of major deficiency in the brain that doesn't allow them to learn. Because even the severely mentally challenged can communicate in their native language. So it's just a very small percentage who can't. They've got usually some physical issue with the brain that doesn't allow that to happen, or their vocal cords or something doesn't allow that to happen. But we are pretty much successful. I'm going to go as 98 to 99% successful in passing on our native language to our kids. And so CI does work, and it does work better. We just need more people to execute it.
Absolutely.
Anybody else have any parting words before we leave for today?
There was a lot that we didn't get to, of course.
Of
But
course, there's always too much,
next
and an
time
hour
we'll
is
have a
never
part
enough.
two. We'll need a part two, I think.
Yeah, it's all, we never have enough time. But Pamela, thank you so much for your ideas of showing the kids are actually doing something with the language, because yes, we do need some of those techniques and strategies to know what to do. I know my last two schools I've worked at, they announce when they're coming, and I hate that. I hate when they
Oh,
announce, because I don't do it, but I know other teachers do it. They turn on their show pony at that time.
oh yeah, yeah.
You
Yes.
know,
Mhm.
that they
Yeah,
don't normally do this stuff, but this
yeah,
day they're going to do it because they're going
yeah,
to be on. I rather just
Mhm.
show up. I don't care. I don't want to stress about it.
yeah.
Just show up,
Mhm.
because what I'm going to do when you announce it and what you're going to do when you show up is going to be the same. You're going to see a real
Yeah,
aspect of what I'm doing.
yeah.
So
Mhm.
sometimes we need those skills. So I would love it if you could share me a list of those, and I can add them to the show notes of those activities that you're
Perfect.
talking about, because that
Perfect.
will
And I've
help
got
people.
on my YouTube channel, I go through them too. So
Okay,
yeah.
yeah, I
Mhm.
already linked your YouTube channel, so I'll go ahead and reiterate that in the show notes so we can
Yeah.
show some concrete techniques for people. And Kelly,
Absolutely. I'll give you a write up.
awesome.
Yeah.
And Kelly, thank you so much for joining us and sharing with us the Bryce Hedstrom observation checklist, because it's so powerful. And you don't have to use Bryce's, but it's a good starting point to be
Yes.
able to have a conversation with your colleague who just happens to be an administrator, so that you guys can work together and get a mutual understanding that is the best practice for kids. Best practice
Yes.
for kids, not for the bean counters, not for the curriculum writers, not for the superintendent, but for the actual kids that are in your class, because that's what we're supposed to be doing it for in the first place. So I thank
Yes.
you both for coming here. Let's go ahead and move into
Thank
our
you.
outward here. Let's go right to this
Thank you
screen.
so much again for having me. This is a blast.
You're
Kelly, nice to
welcome.
meet
Thank
you.
you.
And
Nice to meet you, Pamela.
you're both welcome always to join back. Let's go ahead here. All right, friends. So that's it for today's episode of Comprehend This. I know we just scraped the surface of this topic. It is so big, just like all of our other topics are. I want to give a huge thanks to Pamela and Kelly for helping us survive admin observations with our CI dignity intact. And if this episode reminded you that storytelling, interaction, and comprehension are rigor, clipboard or not, then it did its job. Make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with another language teacher who's been observed during a story about an animal in a hat. And remember, you can watch live on YouTube or catch the replay on your favorite podcast app. Ditch the drills, trust the process, and I'll see you next time on Comprehend This. Goodbye, everybody.